Hello, I am Claire Bridges. I'm a coach with the Louisville Small Business Development Center, and I am here to introduce our webinar host today, Ellie Puckett. She's with Murphy Sales, and she will be working with us today to talk about how much is your business worth, and will you be able to sell it? Welcome, Ellie.
Hi, thank you for having me. I appreciate this opportunity.
Absolutely. As you all join, if you don't mind just dropping your name in the chat, so we can make sure we see where everyone is from. We always like to see who attends and where you're from. And Ellie will share her screen. We'll hold questions until the end, but I'll keep an eye on the chat just to make sure that there's not anything going on in there. And then at the end, we can kind of reach out to Ellie and ask lots of questions, I'm sure. So take it away, Ellie.
Yeah, I see some familiar faces in familiar faces in the chat. So I'm super excited to talk to you guys today about how much your business is worth and will you be able to sell it. And so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and push presentation mode. All right. Feel free to put questions in the chat ask anything. One of my personal goals here is that this is a safe space and there are no room for dumb questions. All too often people don't ask the question because they don't want to appear like they didn't know something, but this is not one of those times. This is for the health and well-being of your business. And so I encourage you to ask any and all questions because I guarantee you someone else is wondering the exact same thing. So today we're going to talk about how much my business is worth. And I'm with Murphy Business Sales. Quickly, Murphy is a franchise business brokerage. We have 140 offices across the country. And here in Louisville, we have an office and we kind of represent the entire state as well as Cincinnati. So if you enjoy my presentation and want to learn more about working with us, don't hesitate to reach out. All right, so a little bit about my background. How do I advance there we go. I spent 10 years in the technology startup world. I was a founder of a space tech company that did microgravity research, and I actually fell into it. My degree was in entrepreneurship, and I just kind of got lucky and immediately got put on the path of tech, scale and sell angel investment companies. And after being a part of several glorious blow-ups, I had this moment where I asked myself, was this really what I intended when I got an entrepreneurship degree, to be an employee of a technology startup? And the answer was no. I always wanted to be an entrepreneur, and I was just entrepreneur adjacent at that point. And so I discovered acquisition entrepreneurship from an angel investor who was investing money in far more things than just technology. And a lot of those were small businesses that served our communities and served their employees and provided really vital functions for our communities and economies. And I was fascinated with it. And so I set on a journey to buy a business. And to be honest, I'm still on that journey. I haven't made an official acquisition, but along that path, I did become a broker with Murphy Business Sales. In my estimation, it was the closest way to continuing to learn about that acquisition path and become deeply involved in it. And so I am wildly passionate about how businesses transition and how we continue to build our communities through small business entrepreneurship. I believe that the small business owner plays a vital role in a community that is often not just they're the backbone of the economy, but rather this actual role that is more intangible, that is like they have employees, but also they are the ones who sponsor Little League, and they are the ones who know that the kid down the street needs a coat. And so we need small businesses to continue to thrive. And that means that the businesses that are currently owned by people who are of retirement age or need to exit for any other reason, health or life situation, or you're just burnt out, we want those businesses to stay alive. because they are really good for their customers and their communities. And so anyways, that passion led me to starting this podcast called Renegade Ventures. And I encourage all of you to check it out. It's on all major podcast platforms. It is aimed at women and people of color and making it in a more inclusive space to talk about business acquisition. But believe me, we are here for everyone and we want to educate everyone. So I want to start by talking about valuations and how a business broker actually determines that valuation. And along this path, I feel like you will be able to back into the general range that your business is worth, or have a much better understanding of what that business is worth by the time you walk out of this webinar. If you are not at that point, or if you feel a little lost in some of the terms, please reach out or ask questions. So Valuations 101. When you take your business to a broker or a CPA that does valuations, and this is important, all CPAs might think they can do your valuation. That doesn't mean that they do them regularly, and they might not have the data around the market that and the methods that is important. So don't just automatically assume that the person who does your bookkeeping can give you that valuation. That doesn't mean they can't, but don't make that assumption. So valuations for existing small businesses are very, very different than startups. Instead of it being a multiple of revenue or just made up out of the thin air, which some startups are, these valuations are based in reality. They are based in profit, cash flow, and market comparisons. And so most people think that their business is worth, or a lot of people think that their business is worth a multiple of its revenue. And that is the first myth that I want to bust. Your business is worth a multiple of something called seller's discretionary earnings, or EBITDA. And that part right there and lies a big wake-up call for a lot of people, because they're saying, I'm worth 2 times my revenue. And in fact, it's much, much closer to the net. We at Murphy and most other people who do valuations are using 3 methods. And different levels of valuations can kind of dig into deeper dives of these methods. But the kind of core methods that I use when I'm determining a business's value is the market method, the multiple method, and the buyer's test, which is also like debt coverage ratio. So I'm going to walk you through those real quick. The market method is by far the most important method, in my opinion, because this is based in how other businesses has sold. Now, like real estate, it looks at things that are similar to you. So instead of it being similar to, say, your house having 3 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms in your general area is less important rather than function of business. And so we determine what is called the seller's discretionary earnings, or EBITDA, and apply a multiple to it that is based in market comparables. So seller's discretionary earnings is the net cash flow that would be available to the buyer. For example, it is what you pay yourself, what is the net income, and any discretionary expenses that could have been spent differently. For example, say your business you are a lawyer and you have a company boat that happens to have your logo on it, and you charge it to the business. The next business owner wouldn't necessarily have to have a company boat. But the only way we get to add that to your seller's discretionary earnings is if it is very documented and very clear what expenses were going to that discretionary use of spending. So we are trying to get the net plus one owner's salary, or what you pay yourself, plus any discretionary items that you might have. This is often very close to this term called EBITDA, which is the earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. And so these 2 terms are similar, and in bigger businesses, say businesses that do over maybe even 2 million, but $5 million in revenue, we're likely going to lean into the EBITDA version. Whereas in small business land, we lean into the seller's discretionary earnings version. And they do have a little bit of difference, and the multiplier is a little different. However, multipliers of seller's discretionary earnings on small businesses typically range between 1 and 5, but the majority are between 2 and 3. And so if you can kind of in your head ask yourself, what is my net income? Do I take a W-2 salary or a guaranteed payment or something of that nature? I can add that part back, not your distributions. Your distributions are in your net income already. So net on your tax return plus your what you paid yourself, plus very documentable discretionary earnings, and then you have your seller discretionary earning number. And then you can ask yourself, what type of business am I? And apply a multiple. So for example, marketing agencies, or ad agencies tend to be down at like the 1 to 2 times multiple, 1.8-ish range. That is kind of their multiple. Businesses that have a lot of recurring revenue might be closer to 3, even 5, if you have a lot of strong recurring contracts. Businesses in manufacturing space might be up closer to 3 to 5. But most small businesses, it's safe to say, multiply yourself by 2, and you're probably in the right range. If you're in a high growth situation, you might start to lean towards the 3, 4, and 5. If you've plateaued, you might be more like 2. If you're under $1 million, you're more like 1 to 2. So that's kind of the general. I know that there's a lot there. And if you want to give me some examples in the comments, I can kind of point you in the direction without pulling actual market comps. But in general, if you find your seller's discretionary earnings or your EBITDA number and you multiply it by a market comparison multiple, and that multiple is determined by your industry and some other factors. The next method is called the multiple of seller discretionary earnings method. And instead of that multiplier being determined by the market, it is determined by a section of questions. And these questions are the most subjective part. So when we use the multiple of SDE method, we are really comparing it to the market method. We don't ever do it in a silo. And that is because we are trying to determine, is the market method in the right range? Or have we not taken into factor that this business does $2 million in revenue and growing by 25% every year? Or have we taken into account some of those more intrinsic things that might not be completely determined by the market, by comparable businesses? So we go through these 10 questions, and I've put all 10 of them here, and we give them a rating between 0 to 3. So 1.5 kind of being like the non-answer answer. So we say historical profits. Is it below average or is it above average? And we give it a rating between 0 and 3. Income risk. Do they have strong revenue and profits every year? Do we know that they're going to have these clients year over year over year? Or is that income at risk of disappearing with the founder? Is that income at risk because their customer concentration, they have one customer and it's 50%. And if that customer disappeared, that's a high income risk. And so we give that a rating from 0 to 3. Deal financing. This one often we might not know right away, but if we sold this business, is it going to be have really good terms, or is it going to be hard to finance? The next one being business type. Things with high assets might rank higher than like service-based businesses with low assets. This is more of a valuation of other hard assets rather than necessarily the business type, but that's what it's called. Business growth, has the business been growing? Has it plateaued, or is it declining? 0 would be declining, 3 would be rapid growth. Location and facilities, that one's pretty self-explanatory. How good of the shape are they in? Marketability, being like, is this a market with a lot of buyers right now, or is this something that's going to be hard to market? Desirability being almost the same question again, but is it more like, is it dynamic? Is it interesting? Or is it very basic, repetitive task? So desirability being more like in the level of complexity or interest or growth opportunity. And then competition, is it a crowded market or not? And market trend, is that market as a whole growing or dying? And so we give a value on each of these things from 0 to 3, and then it takes weighted values and produces a multiple that is then multiplied by your seller's discretionary earnings. Should be noted that if you are a business that does over $1 million in revenue, you get a size premium add-on to that number. And that is based on your industry, what that size premium is. And so that multiplier then gets multiplied by your seller's discretionary earnings, and it pops up a number, and that number is then compared to the market method. And if they're generally within the same range, we probably have a pretty strong number starting to form. It might show us, though, that the market method says that this business is 600,000, but the multiple of SDE method says that it's more like 650 or 700, because some factors are really strong about this business, and it kind of can indicate we could ask more than the market average. The last is called the buyer's test method. And while my favorite method is the market, and my least favorite is the multiple of SDE because of its subjectivity, the most important is the buyer's test. And this is because it's simulating what the underwriters are going to do when a person goes to buy that business. It's the question, does it lend? Is it lendable? And so the way this kind of goes down, I've got another slide on it, but it's an equation that says, what is a reasonable owner or manager salary? If that person was replaced by the owner or replaced by another human being, what do they kind of have to make? In this example, I put in 75,000. What is the required rate of return on the down payment? The standard one is kind of like 30%. And what was the down payment required by the bank on this loan? 10%. What is the estimated annual capital expense for this business? 5,000, 10,000. If it's a heavy capital thing, maybe it's 100,000. But we're answering these questions. The current loan interest rates, which I'm going to get into at the end of this, is actually right now for a business that does not have any hard assets, the loan interest rate is 11.25 with most SBA lenders. The loan term is about 10 years. And then the debt coverage ratio that's being required by banks is about 1.3. So with those determining factors, this example business had would be worth I should have put in the seller's discretionary earnings, so sorry about that. The estimated selling price for this particular business is $163,000. And the way that they got to that math, sorry for the math, is this test check. The seller's discretionary earnings on that business was $121,000, almost $122,000, minus the owner's salary being $75,000 a year, which means the adjusted EBITDA would be about $46,000. the required rate of return being $4,000, almost $5,000, the capital expenditure being about $10,000, the debt service coverage being $24,000, the debt service being $24,000, and the coverage being required by the bank $7,000, with the remaining being $0. So the maximum that the business could sell for under these conditions is $163,000. So this example actually shows you that a business that did a seller's discretionary earnings of $121,000 might not actually be worth 2x EBITDA or 2x SDE, because the bank wouldn't loan it at that price. And I gave you kind of a depressing scenario here as more of a warning, that just because I said that it is 2x your market or your seller's discretionary earnings, there's a world where it is more like 1.5 or 1.58, I think is what this one is. So I want to talk a little bit about the pillars of a valuable business. So now you probably in your head have said, my net income plus my salary is X dollars. And that means times 2, I'm worth 300,000. I really need to be at 500,000 before I'm willing to sell this business. Or to retire, I know that I need to sell this business for 700,000, but right now I'm only at 300,000. This is why it's important to know your business's worth. And so some of the pillars that you can use to increase your value, I wanted to talk about. The first is processes, systems, and vision. If you are still the secret sauce of your business, then your business is less valuable than if you have documented processes and systems in place that someone else can continue to execute upon, whether that be a manager or another owner. So if you're still at the point in your business where everything is in your brain, in your head, you are pivotal to the business, your business is not sellable. I don't care what the numbers say. You will struggle in that transaction because you are what there is to buy, and you are the thing that is leaving. And so processes and systems and a general vision of where it can and go beyond you is incredibly important to growing the value of your business. The next is profitable and growing. If you are not a profitable business, you are not sellable, period. I know that sounds harsh, and you want to tell me that your website domain gets lots of hits and it's probably worth something. I'm not saying that it isn't, but you will have to go through GoDaddy to sell it. You are not a sellable business unless you are profitable. The more you are still on a growing trajectory, the more you are worth, the higher multiple you can get. So those are ways to grow your value. Management team. Again, you're the thing leaving your business if you're selling it. So having a strong management team or manager of your business, someone that you are grooming and growing up to stay behind, is very valuable to a buyer. If your business is being run without you and you can go on a vacation for a month and you know that everything will, for the most part, still function, the number of buyers that will be interested in your business is a lot higher than if you are needed 80 hours a week every week. Growing that apprentice manager for your business makes it an extremely attractive sale, which means you might have multiple offers, and that will push up the value of your business. Strong books and records, verifiable, single sources of truth, clean books. These are incredibly important. Books don't necessarily increase the value of your business, but they can decrease the value of your business. The moment that someone comes in and they tell me that they have multiple books, 2 sets of books and that they take lots of cash from the business, or they haven't reconciled their books in years, it is a red flag. So if you are thinking that you want to sell and you have back taxes and dirty books and lots of things to sort, get with a CPA, get with a bookkeeper, start investing your money and time in that area and cleaning it up. If you are not organized, be honest with yourself, and it will be worth the $300 to $500 a month that it will cost to pay a bookkeeper, because if you don't, you will actually end up shooting yourself in the foot over and over and over again and probably make up that money and more. So this can kill the business's ability to sell. This can kill your profit. This can kill, if your books are not clean, you do not actually know how the health and wellness of your business is doing. Full stop. And then another huge value builder I've mentioned before is contracts and recurring revenue. You have a lot of handshake agreements. That is not valuable. That doesn't sell. That means that person is doing business with you, not your business. And so recurring revenue and businesses that have contracts and recurring contracts in place make for a strong, valuable business. I want to do like facts real quick, and then I have 1 or 2 more slides, and then I'll take questions. Facts about selling your business. You must be profitable. If you're not profitable, if you're trying to get out from underneath of this business, you might find a friend or family or somebody who wants to do a turnaround and take advantage of that. But 9 times, maybe 9.5 times out of 10, you have to be profitable to sell your business. You need a minimum of 3 years financials. That doesn't mean that you can't sell in year 2 or 3 if you've been at it, but there's going to be a lot of questions as to why you want to sell sooner than that. And maybe you started it as a side hustle and it became a hustle or a full-time thing, but you don't have 3 years of books and records. You're going to need 3 years of tax returns at a minimum. Fun fact, it takes 9 to 12 months to sell a business. This is because it is a long process. From the moment that you engage a broker or decide to sell your business yourself, you have to create a package and get all of your financials and records and things in order. You have to list it. You have to look for buyers. You have to talk to buyers. Those buyers then make offers. Those offers then get time to do due diligence, and that time can be anywhere from 45 to 60 days or longer if it's bigger business. And then you're working with a bank. So, businesses can sell in 4 or 6 months, but that is absolutely flying. So go ahead and prepare yourself for 9 to 12 months. So if you think you are ready to exit your business in the next year, it is time to call a business broker or talk to your banker or CPA and start making the moves to get ready to sell your business. The bank may require some amount of seller financing. So most people are surprised by that, but the banks like to know that you are going to transition that business well to that next business owner. It might only be 5% of the loan. They might not require it at all, but heads up, oftentimes banks like it when a seller holds a note for 5 to 10%, sometimes more. It de-risks for the bank and the buyer, and so they sometimes require that. The question I'm often asked is, how much do business brokers charge? It's between 8 and 12%. The bigger the business, the lower the percentage. Often we start at 10% on the first million and then go down. So 10% on the first million, 8% on the next million, so on and so forth. It keeps going down. When you're thinking about selling your business, please don't go post it on Facebook unless you are absolutely desperate. Don't tell your employees. Don't tell your friends. Don't tell anyone. Now, if that friend happens to be a CPA or a lawyer or might be a really good connection, I'm not saying that you shouldn't confide in them, but loose lips cause killed businesses and you won't be able to sell it. And so making sure that you understand that confidentiality is key. a residential realtor is not a business broker. They will accidentally list it on the MLS, and you do not want that to happen. So secret cash doesn't count. If you have been taking that money from the business, that's something I don't need to know about. I'm not judging it. There's lots, we all are trying to mitigate our taxes. However, you have received the benefit of that money by not having to pay taxes on it. And it is not countable towards your valuation. And it is not countable in a sell, especially if the bank is involved. You cannot ask for an SBA, ask for the buyer to be able to take an SBA loan at the same time telling it that you evaded taxes. So it's not really a judgment, it's just a note, because I know that lots of us are trying our best to figure out how to mitigate taxes as business owners. But 3 to 5 years before you decide to sell your business, put it all in, count it all, it's worth it. 30, I'm going to jump down to number 10. Basically, if you don't count it, you're saving yourself 30 cents on tax, but it is costing you probably $2 or more in valuation. So put it in. And then certain expenses that are trackable and documented can be added back. I noted that earlier. And then if you're thinking that you want to sell your business in the next 3 to 5 years, I suggest that you go get a valuation from a CPA, from a business broker, from somebody, and look at what are the things that you can do differently over the next 3 to 5 years to maximize the value in your business. Seller financing is a way that you can get a higher dollar amount for your business. You can typically get as much as 9 to 10% more on your sale price. It allows you to defer your taxes because you are only taxed on what you get each year rather than the entirety being in 1 year. And you actually get the interest income that the bank would have gotten. So just something to think about there. And then a quick note on the current state of SBA lending. They're still really active. Most acquisitions use a SBA 7A loan. However, while they are active, interest rates right now are ranging between 8.75 to 11.25. And so that actually is affecting the valuation for business owners because the debt coverage ratios are not as good looking as they were when the rates were a lot lower. So heads up. And last but not least, each bank is kind of going through a transition period right now. The SBA changed guidelines in April and they went into effect in May. And the banks that do SBA loans are currently working through how they handle those processes and procedures under the new SBA guidelines and changes. This criteria now focuses mostly on credit report, the cash flow of the business, and equity and collateral, which were a major focuses, but there was one in there that they feel like led to lack of diversity in lending or opened up for subjectivity. Let's put it that way. And so that is now gone. It will be based on your credit report, cash flow, and equity or collateral. And then one of the other big changes that has been awesome is the SBA now allows for partial buyouts. So before you had to sell 100% of that business to a new owner. Now you could, in theory, sell 25, 50, 75% off to someone maybe as a manager. And this has created interesting transitions for business owners. But finding banks that will do this new version is a little bit harder. So reach out to people like the SBDC or myself to talk about who's open to that kind of lending. And then about Murphy Business Sales. So does anyone have any questions? I'll exit out of the PowerPoint.
Thank you so much, Ellie. This was super informational. We do have one question so far. Cynthia asks, what is the key difference between a business broker and a commercial realtor?
Yeah, great question. So commercial realtors are still mostly trained on the real estate portion. And a lot of business brokers carry a real estate license. In some states that is required. In some states it is not. However, you have to, in Kentucky, you have to have a real estate license to sell real estate. Business brokerages like mine have people who carry the licenses for when we have real estate to sell with a business, and some of us have our own. But the biggest difference here is that they're trained in real estate pretty much only. They don't necessarily know how to evaluate and sell the goodwill portion of a business. There are commercial realtors who are business brokers who have done that training and who do understand the business transition portion. But I would say they came at it from a real estate perspective, whereas I came at business, how do businesses transition, how do businesses sell, and then said, I need a real estate license to sell the real estate part. If you are trying to sell your business as a complete whole package, I would suggest that you work with someone who has business broker training.
I fully echo you there. Yes. Next question. What is the best way to shop or find a good broker for your business? Or if you have questions to ask.
Yeah. So I think that, obviously Google is your friend. Locally, we have a handful. We actually have a surprisingly less because it has been an industry that most people are retiring out of. So we have maybe a little bit of a need at the moment in Louisville, but that doesn't mean that we don't still have plenty to choose from. But I would say figuring out who is in town and maybe having a coffee or phone call and seeing who fits you and your personality and their processes and systems and how they go about that. I would also ask about track record. Most of the ones in town are a little industry agnostic. There are brokers that absolutely specialize in certain industries, and so you might feel more called to that, or you might like the processes and systems that another one, or the personalization that another one provides to you. So I definitely think it's worth having a phone call with multiple and asking other business owners who's worked with who or whatnot. I will make a shameless plug for Phil and I. Phil, my business partner, has been doing it a lot longer than I have. I am newer, but I am obsessed with the process. And so it's a lot less, it's a lot more educational and a lot less used car sales when you're with us. Now, that doesn't mean that, that everyone is used car salesy at all, but it's not about me as a person as much as we have the systems and processes of Murphy, and Phil has been wildly successful and is probably the top broker in the region. And so having people who have that kind of track record is a good place to start.
Yeah, absolutely. Another question, if going through COVID, your sales plummeted, but now you're going back up, how is that taken into consideration in the selling of your business?
That's an awesome question.
Currently,
restaurant, if you were closed in COVID, we wait years. We didn't even talk about years. So we use 3 to 5 years. COVID businesses heavily affected by COVID, positive or negative. We actually weight that year differently. And we like to take 5 years. How did you perform before? How did you perform after? Were you able to sustain that 2020 income if you skyrocketed, you sold toilet paper in 2020 and your business skyrocketed in profit, but it did drop right back down, it'll be weighted less. If you took a massive hit and you were closed for a part of the year, say you're a fitness studio or something, we can actually bring it all the way down to zero and really look at the 2 years before and the 3 years after. So we definitely are taking that into major consideration, and all buyers are very understanding of that.
Yeah, definitely. Y'all are very, very intrigued by all that Ellie has to say. So here's another great question. We have purchased property that our offices operate out of. Does that make it difficult to sell, being that the business does not own the property? And is it a good idea to continue to purchase real estate for the business to operate out of?
Yeah, no, I actually don't think it's a bad idea that those two things are kept separate, because it gives you optionality when it comes time to sell. You can absolutely sell them both at the same time if you choose to, or you can just sell the goodwill of the business with a lease back. My caution is make sure that you are charging yourself rent at a fair market rate. If you are not charging yourself rent at a fair market rate, we have to do a negative add back, because that next business owner will be having to pay you rent. And so go ahead and charge yourself that rent at a fair market value. Charge your business. I see business owners all the time who paid off their mortgage and they stopped charging themselves rent. And then they're like, but I make this much net. And it's like, yeah, but now you made $80,000 net. And I'm like, yeah, but you're going to lease it to them for $80,000. So you're actually at zero. And so make sure you do the add back.
Yeah. Okay. What type of expenses are possibly added back in for sale? So rent, anything else that you automatically...
Fully discretionary expenses. My example of the boat is like a little over the top, but a good example of something that can't be added back. If you golf and you're charging all of your golf as sales and marketing, unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to add that back. The bank's going to say the next business owner still has to do sales and marketing, and we can't determine that their sales and marketing is going to be cheaper than your choice of sales and marketing. However, if you are carrying a business membership to a major country club, I could probably add the membership back. Does that make sense? So it's that like line that says, and the ultimate decider here isn't me, and it isn't that person. I have people that plead with me to add things back all day, every day. It is the bank. What will the bank allow for me to add back? And so there might be some adjustments even after we've listed, even after we've had an LOI that the bank says, no, you were too liberal with your add back, or whatnot, or actually we can justify that one.
Sure, that makes sense. Okay, 2 questions here. What does Murphy Business charge for a business valuation? And then are there industry specific business brokers within Murphy?
There are industry specific business brokers within Murphy. And for a valuation, but businesses under $1 million in revenue, it's like $1,500 for a basic one, or $2,500 for kind of like an expanded. It is the same valuation, but has a little bit more consulting, like touch more consulting conversation around the number and how you improve it. Then if you're above $1 million in revenue, or if you have like multiple entities and holding entities, it's more of like upon quote. But it likely isn't going to be a lot more. We have to like make sure it's not going to be a lot more work to sort it all out. And then I think I said we typically charge 10% on the first million, 8% on the second million, 6% on the third million, 4% on the fourth million, 2% after that. But that is, I'll be honest, that is negotiable, especially when you hit like the $5 million range. That becomes a conversation, and maybe it's not like the scaling slide, maybe it's a flat rate, there's conversation there.
Sure. What are you seeing as a difference in valuation on an inside sale versus an external sale?
There's not normally a difference in valuation. Where we see the difference is in the financing. So if you're selling to a family member, or if you're selling to a current management team, you might be more likely to do more seller financing, or have more favorable terms because they are an inside buyer, but that doesn't necessarily change the amount that the business is worth. And then I would say, maybe if you went outside, there would be depending on the type of business, there would be multiple offers that could drive up value a little bit that you wouldn't necessarily get to see happen if you did an inside. However, I am here to advocate for inside buyouts. While that means that probably doesn't even land at me, we can do transaction specialist work where we don't charge a percentage. We charge more like flat fees, or it's maybe not 10%. Me as a human, not me as a Murphy business broker, says that it is what's in the best, that's in the owner's best interest to see, in the company's best interest, if you have someone internal that transitions that business well. I think it's just a huge win for your employees and your community if you've raised up a leader who then actually takes it on. And I would still encourage you to use someone like us and my blatant honesty, because obviously that is not a transaction that I would get to see 10% of. But I still think that's probably what's best for you and the company.
Yeah, definitely. Any tips or strategies when selling percentages of your business? An example, transitioning from a solo entrepreneur 100% ownership to a 50-50 partnership.
Well, I wouldn't transition to a 50-50 partnership. I would keep that at 51-49. I highly recommend that you don't do that and go talk to a lawyer or a CPA or SBDC. And I think everyone would echo me. Especially if it's been your business, you are a solo entrepreneur, it was your idea, you have built it to the point where someone wants to join you. There's a world, if they're bringing you cash, and then I think that there's a conversation that could be had about what that ownership looks like. And then it's probably a phone call or coffee offline with an SBDC mentor or even myself that talks about, like, is it an investment partner? Is it a working partner? Is like what that will actually also help determine like how you evaluate, or if you're using a future valuation that talks about the potential that actually might make their dollars worth less right at the moment. You get into like M&A, like you can actually get into like startup investing and finance that gets really complicated and hairy. That makes it hard for me to give you really strong advice without more details.
Sure. Yes. When is it a good time to get that evaluation, that business valuation? How many years before you're considering selling should you start this process?
I think it's always a good idea to know the value of your business. And if you can't kind of back into it yourself, then it might be time. Because if you want to be building in a way that is growing your asset, and you don't necessarily want to wait till 3 to 5 years to say, I need to clean that up. So say you're 10 years out and you know that even when you're starting the business, a few years in, a few years of revenue, getting that understanding of where you're at. Because if you have a goal that says, I want to sell this business for X amount so that I can retire with this amount, then you need to go ahead and probably start having that conversation so that you can be making the kind of business decisions that are more active and intentional rather than reactionary at the end, trying to clean it up and make it worth what you think it's worth. If you are 3 to 5 years from selling your business, it is time, period.
Yeah. How do you discreetly advertise the sale of your business? Like, what channels do you put that out on?
So this is part
or how does Murphy do it? Either both.
Yeah. So someone can absolutely represent their own deal. And I would say if your business is going to sell for under even 150,000, you might want to learn, go listen to my podcast, read some books, and maybe represent your own deal. Because the chunk that we're going to take is going to be sizable. And you actually might even have a hard time finding a broker who will take it. Because of the amount of work and the amount of money end up getting a little mismatched. I know it sounds like we take a lot of money, but it actually is an insane amount of work that people don't realize. Like
Yeah.
compared to real estate, because we're like valuing intangible assets, we're like
Yes.
waist deep in your financials.
Mhm.
So it's a lot more than like a real estate agent. Say the question again so I can get back to my response.
Oh, yeah, sorry. So,
Train of thought.
how do you discreetly advertise the sale of the business?
So, what we do and what you could totally replicate on your own is we gather a package. That is your, last 5 years tax returns, monthly P&L reports, a balance sheet, all of those things. And then we create something called a confidential information memorandum and a teaser. The teaser has no identifying information at all. It'll say something like car wash in Louisville, Kentucky.
Yeah.
That doesn't tell you which car wash. If you have a more specific style business, then it might say, in the state or in the region. I have a listing that is already under LOI, but it's a dental handpiece repair business. I talk about it as a dental handpiece repair business. It doesn't tell you which one, it doesn't tell you where it's at. But in general, you kind of have an understanding of what that business functionally does. And so that teaser will include the financial portion, the P&L or the cash flow of the business, how we got to scale discretionary earnings. And so it peaks off someone that says, I think that this style of business with 1 employee or 2 or 5 employees that does that amount of money in that industry sounds interesting to me. I'm ready to sign an NDA. Then they would sign an NDA and they would get that confidential information memorandum, which goes into more detail about your market, your size, your financial information, structure, number of employees, story. It kind of is a more detailed version, and who you are and where you're located. And so getting a non-disclosure agreement, verifying that that buyer is semi-legitimate and not one of your employees just creeping, all of that we attempt to do as brokers. And then those listing websites, they're biz by sell. There are brokerage website because people, look for business brokers and they go to our own listings on our own websites. LopeNet is one, that does commercial real estate. They will post businesses without information. There's several like websites, sort of like the Zillow for businesses. However, there's not a single source of truth for business sales, the way that the MLS is kind of the single source of truth for real estate sales. And so some deals would be considered off market, and we would actually go to our, buyers tell us all the time what they're looking for. And we would say, hey, I just got a listing for a business that meets your desires. Here's the confidential information memorandum. Or here's the NDA so they can see the confidential information memorandum. So that's kind of the channels that we take. For very specific businesses, we even would make a list of strategic buyers, competitors that might be interested in buying them out, or someone in a different city that might want to expand to a location here. And we can go after that. This is the kind of the work that a broker does that is actually a lot of work. That help us target the right buyer for your business.
Right. And then is the potential buyer validated before sending them signing the NDA? How do you kind of vet that?
To some extent, yes. We tend to ask for an employee list. We will tend to go do a quick Google search or LinkedIn, see who they are. If they are a competitor, often I will ask the buyer or the seller if they're comfortable with me sharing that information before I share it. On our, and what if you're going to represent yourself, I would suggest that you do, is on our NDA, there is a line for liquid capital for down payment. And, it's not verifying, but it's making them write it down.
Yeah. Okay, I think this might be our last question. Is it possible to use a broker to shop for a partner in business? I'm assuming this is like as you're starting, but maybe not.
Oh, if you're looking to, or maybe even if you're not, if you're looking for a new investment partner or something.
Yeah.
I haven't done it yet, but that doesn't mean it's not possible. I have a listing that is coming up that the business owner would love to sell internally, but the internal person can't afford it on their own. And so then my brain as a broker says, which one of my investor style business acquisition people, strategic buyers or private equity firms would love to buy a business that already has a manager in place that wants 10% or 20% of the business.
Yeah.
And so as a broker, I'm strategic in that way because my goal is doing what's best for the business owner and the community and employees. I'm not saying that that's everyone's lens, but I think that that's how Phil and I operate, and I would hope that other people operate. But yeah, that's kind of the no is the answer, and yet that doesn't mean that someone like me wouldn't help you.
Wouldn't, yeah. And along those lines, we've got some more questions. This is all
Keep going. Yeah, we're good.
Yeah. So, this person is wondering if it's a good idea to get that business valuation done. If you get buyers who say, I am looking for such and such business, and then your company may reach out to us regarding the buyer, like just having the valuation done kind of, would that spark like, oh, I've got this, one I just did, and then you might connect them? Or is it really, you have to say, and now I'm ready to sell my business?
Well, I mean, that starts a conversation with me, and that's the reason why we do them. And that's honestly the reason why they're only $1,500 is because we're doing it to start that relationship. We are wanting to know that you want to sell your business in 3 to 5 years. And if we have a buyer who's looking for businesses like yours, or if we see your business and we say, honestly, you're ready, you're ready, we will definitely share that with you. I'm in a place in my business brokerage career that if I give you a valuation and your valuation is above $400,000, $350,000, $400,000, I want your business. Like Phil is at the point, like Phil, my partner, he's at the point where like, he's like, take it or leave it at anything under $1 million sale price. Because he does deals that are 5 and 10 and $15 million. If you're above 400,000, like I want your business. So I'm going to say, when do you want to sell? And if I have any buyers that might fit your need. That is not saying that you should sell your business. It is 100% in your best interest to do whatever is best for you and your family and your situation. But you wouldn't want a broker who's not going to be aggressive in the sales process. So
yeah, absolutely.
So yes, of course. Now, if you're under that line, that doesn't mean that I wouldn't absolutely list your business for sale if I believe that it is sellable. But there's this world that says right around there kind of equals time and money, and it all works out beautifully. And it also will sell pretty easy because your seller's discretionary earnings hits this point where it can handle its business loan. And so even if you're not there now, I would say every business owner's goal should be like being worth $300,000 or $400,000, because that's when the math really starts to work.
Yeah. Here's an interesting question. I know we're like right at the top of the hour. If the buyer is using venture capital money to spend and no lender, who approves the purchase of like all these stipulations with the bank, but does it change the valuation process if those stipulations aren't there?
So if it's a true private equity, venture capital, angel capital person or group, they are going to take a very similar due diligence process that a bank would have taken anyways. And so you'll be going through that. And honestly, if you're working with a private equity person and you don't have a broker or someone representing you, even if the buyer is unwilling to help fund it, or they don't want to work with a traditional broker, that's when you might ask me to put on or someone else to put on like a consultant, even to put on a transition specialist kind of hat to protect you and know when to draw the line. Because if you have been a business owner and you've done the thing for, you've owned a HVAC and plumbing company for 25 years, and all of a sudden private equity thinks that they're the belle at the ball, except for they have lots of training and they're going to murder you with numbers and language that you don't understand. And they're going to do it on purpose because they want the best deal possible for themselves. And it's not that they're not like great worthy buyers, but I would add that person that plays their same game in the mix to protect yourself, because at some point they're gonna question you to death, and somebody has to say, enough, do you want the business or not?
Right. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Ellie. I'm going to have to end questions there. And this has been great. There will be a recording sent out as well as the slideshow presentation. So if y'all need to refer back, you'll get Ellie's contact info, my contact info. And then I believe there will be a survey sent out as well for all the participating members. So if you could please fill that out, it would be greatly appreciative. Thank you so much, Ellie. This was super informative and a great way to spend
you.
my
I'm so glad you
hour,
guys had me. And if you all need anything, please reach out and please listen to Renegade Ventures podcast.
Yes.
And if you have questions and you want those to be episodes, that would very much help me, because sometimes I'm like trying to figure out what you want to learn about.
Yeah. There's definitely more to learn. So
yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you.
All right. Have a good day. Bye.
Bye.